Hello and welcome to this video on Conbond, taking a deeper dive. We're going to be going into more detail about the Kanban method. This was introduced to software development world. Well, it's been used for a long time. Uh, the Scrum board in Scrum, the ready, doing, done, is sort of like a Kanban board used in manufacturing, and that's what I always originally thought it was. Then David J. Anderson picked it up and ran with it while he was working at a client and created more of a method around it. So the Kanban, capital K, method, capital M, Kanban method is something that he has developed, and a lot of people look to that as a great place to start, and I totally agree. It's a great place to start, but I would also encourage you to look at the rest of Lean and pull in things that make sense. And understanding the history is a great place to start. So what the heck is Kanban in the first place? It's another one of those crazy Japanese words that we use a lot of when we're uh, working in lean kinds of things, because that's where it comes from. And it actually means signal card. So if you were, that's signal card. If you were in a Toyota manufacturing plant and you were the guy or gal that was responsible for putting the doors on the cars on the assembly line, you would bend down, you'd pick up a door, you'd put it on, and you'd bolt it on or whatever you did, and then you'd bend down, and you pick up another door. You're picking these doors up off of a pallet, right? So all the put another door and you pick it up and put another door on, pick it up and put another. As soon as you're working through the doors on your pallet, you'd get towards the bottom. Maybe you'd have 2, 3, 5 doors. I don't know, whatever the number is. But you'd put that next door up on the car, and there would be a little piece of paper. It would look something like this. It wouldn't say wide flange widgets. It would say Toyota passenger side front door Prius or something like that, and it would say, where do you need them? What is your location? And what is the container that they would come in? It would be some X pallet. How many are on a pallet? And you would take this thing, you'd go over, somehow you would read it maybe with a barcode reader with that little barcode there, or you'd send it through an old pneumatic tube back in the day. But one way or another, this would get sent to the people who supplied you with the doors. And so you'd grab it, stick it, barcode it, whatever, and then you just keep putting doors on, right? It takes a second to do, and you'd be done. So the next thing that would happen is at the other end, the people who have the pallets of doors and are building up pallets of doors or whatever, they're assembling the doors, they would get your notice and go, hey, Sarah needs more doors. So they would grab a forklift, drive it over there, drop up. As you are putting basically your last door on, they've timed it with the assembly line speed and the speed and distance to where the doors are stored, so that as you're putting the last door from your pallet onto the car on the assembly line, that forklift is driving up, taking away your old pallet, dropping a new pallet, so you don't have to stop working, you just keep going, right? So that it's a timing tool that helps replenish the stock that you're using. So that's really what it is. Another way you can look at them too is and where it came from was the folks at Toyota came over to the United States and were looking at grocery stores, and grocery stores had at the back of the prong that had things on it. Say you had, I don't know, bowls or bags of candy, right? When you pulled all the bags of candy off, you've seen it, I'm sure, at the grocery store. There's a little piece of paper at the back that's like up against the wall. That little piece of paper is a inventory replenishment card. The Kanban is very, very similar to that inventory replenishment card in that it gives you a signal to do some kind of work. So then they would replenish your doors. You'd be all good to go, and you'd keep assembling them. So software development world took this idea because we work with an ephemeral thing. Software is not, you just don't see it like you see construction or doors going on a car. And so we have to use signal cards to track our work. Oh yeah, this is the picture for telling you the story about the assembling the doors. So principles of Kanban. Really, Kanban is a great approach for evolutionary change to an organization. Unlike Scrum, Scrum says stop what you're doing and do it this way. Kanban says start where you are and evolve. So Kanban's the approach would be start with what you have right now. The way you're developing your products or services or whatever is fine. You're doing okay right now. You just want to get better. So this is a way of analyzing and improving. So start where you are. As a group, agree that you're going to improve what you're working on. Respect the current roles and responsibilities and things like that. We're not going to change all those things up right away. Maybe that'll change, but as an evolutionary way. And one of the principles that the Kanban method espouses is leadership isn't a title, right? That anybody can take on the role of leadership, and it should be that way. This gets to the idea that the reason that this is important, I mean, is because suggestions for improvement often come from the people who are actually doing the work, not the people who are managing the work. It makes it sound like managers aren't doing work, and that's not what I mean. But the people who are putting the doors on the cars have a better idea of how to make improvements to their process than the people who are upstream of that. So accepting that leadership can come from anywhere and good ideas come from everywhere. So some of the, I don't know why they use the word properties, but some people have used the word properties of Kanban. I think these are still principles. The way it works is this. The first thing you want to do is you want to visualize the flow. So what the heck does that mean? Well, work flows through your organization, and it follows processes usually, some kind of business process, right? That's one of the four aspects of an agile organization. If you haven't heard of those, please go watch the video on the four aspects of agile organizations. But the first thing to do is visualize the flow of work in your organization. So this is kind of the standard layout of a Kanban board, and you would just lay out what your process is. Your existing, this is how we do it. Don't change anything. You're just visualizing it, right? So there you go. Visualized the flow. The next thing you want to do is here, make policies explicit. Well, what does that mean? That means just you have policies within your organization that are implicit, right? When the requirements are done, they get handed off to the development team to build it. What does done actually mean? What are the, how big is it? How small is it? How much documentation is there? How little documentation is? So you just want to make those policies explicit. So I like to do that with what I call exit criteria for each of the columns within your board, your Kanban board. So you've laid out the pieces of work that you do, the stages of work that you do it. Now you're just saying what it means to be in or out of that column, right? To get in, it has to have accomplished these things. To get out, it has to have accomplished those things. If you just have exit criteria, then you're fine, right? Because the exit of one is the entrance of the other. So just make sure that it is that, though. And yeah, so just make sure that the exit criteria of requirements is equal to the entrance criteria for build. Otherwise, there's either a column in between that you're not thinking about, or there's a miscommunication between your development team and your requirements team, right? So look at that. Definition of ready for things that are in the backlog. They're ready to be pulled into the requirements column. What does that look like? So there we go. We've made policies explicit. We know exactly what it means to be in and out according to our current policies. Don't change anything yet. Just document what you've got. And then you want to manage the flow. Okay, what does manage the flow mean? Well, it means let's pay attention to how things flow through the system and tweak it, right? And to do that, there are a lot of different measures. And this is where Kanban starts to get a little bit complicated, so stay with me. WIP is a term called work in process. Well, I have definitions on the next page. So you want to track WIP, cycle time, lead time, and throughput in order to manage the flow. So work in process is how many things are being worked on at a given time. So if you were doing the assembly line, it's how many cars are currently being assembled right now through the whole process, or how many cars are in the door attachment phase of the assembly, right? So in our other diagram, in the Kanban flow diagram of our organization, how many things are in the requirements section, right? How many pieces of work are in there? That's your WIP, work in process. Throughput. So here's work in process. How many things do you have at each given place? Throughput is count them as they come out, right? If you're the catcher and you're just standing there at the end of the assembly line, you're not looking at anything else on the assembly line. You're just looking at things that drop off the assembly line, count them, and time them, right? So given a day, click, how many come out? 12 cars came out in a 12-hour shift, click. That means the throughput is 1 car per hour. Pretty simple. It's things per period of time. Cycle time is, well, it's a confusing term because people use it multiple different ways. So when you hear someone say cycle time, make them define what they mean. Because cycle time is essentially the time that a thing spends in a process. The question is, what process, and how are you defining the beginning and end of that process? So some people will time from the time something starts in requirements to the time something ends in requirements, right? So I pulled it in, I worked on it, and then I was done with it, and that's my cycle time. Maybe. You can also say cycle time is all the way to when you can pull another thing in, right? So there may be other pieces of work that you have to do in order to pull. So one is start to finish and one is start to start. Another thing that you have to be careful about defining is what is the system that you're talking about, right? In your organization, you may have a requirements phase, a design phase, and then a development phase and a testing phase. And one person may see requirements and design as kind of the same thing. So when they're tracking cycle time, they're actually saying both of those things. And when you're saying cycle time, you're saying something different. So you have to be sure you're comparing apples to apples. So be careful with cycle time. But essentially, it's how long does it take for a thing to go through a process, a thing to get done. Lead time is essentially, you can sort of look at it as the cycle time for a customer, only it also includes how much inventory is in the system. So lead time really is the amount of time it takes for, so lead time is this, customer wait time, essentially. If I was a customer and I made a request, how long would it take for me to get a response, to get my product delivered, right? So that means how long does it take to go through each step, and given the inventory that's in process, right, how long does it take to actually go through the whole thing? So it's not just adding up the cycle times of each of the steps in the process, but also acknowledging the fact that, well, yeah, that's our cycle time, but there's 4 things in process at any given time. So each one of those 4 things in phase 1 has to get done first before mine gets worked on, and then it moves over to the next column. See how that works? So it's actually the cycle times, the cumulative of the cycle times, the sum of the cycle times, times the number of pieces in process, as long as the pieces are all the same size. So, how was that for some math? You'll probably want to go back and listen to that again. So you want to manage the flow. So we've got explicit policies. Now we've talked about how you manage the ways of looking at the flow, and how do you manage it? Well, you want to manage it by tracking cycle time in particular for each of the sections, and tracking your lead time and throughput. Those are really the 3 biggies. So cycle time for each of the steps, and then throughput, how many things per day or per week or for 2 weeks or whatever your time period is. And how long does it take for a thing to get from here to here, right? So what I was saying about throughput, I can show you here easier. So I had this card here, and it moves to 1, and then 2, and it's done. And then the people in build pull it in. They pull it in. Whoops. Sorry. They pull it in, but they have to work on this one too. So cycle time is a pure number, and throughput takes into account, lead time takes into account the inventory that's in the process as well. All right. So that's what you would do. You would then put a limit on your bottleneck. So you'd look through the system and you go, okay, well, the cycle time for this one was 1 day. The cycle time for this one was 3 days. The cycle time for this one is 5 days. And the cycle time for this one is only 1 day. And these people are sitting around waiting sometimes. Well, when you spot somebody that's waiting, you know that that's where your bottleneck is. Just before that is your bottleneck. So you see that there's the bottleneck, and so then what you do is you put a work in process limit. So let's limit that to 5 and see if we can get work to flow more smoothly through the system. And there's exercises I'll explain in the airplane game video how to actually do this and see it working in process. But so you'd limit the work in process there, say to 5, and that would help throttle the system. What you're going to find is if you improve this one to get work to actually flow through this more smoothly so that the one behind it isn't delayed anymore, all you'll do is move the bottleneck, right? You'll move it probably to the build phase. That's theory of constraints. So really recommend that you read Eli Goldrat's book, The Goal, and talk about the theory of constraints there. But the idea isn't necessarily to remove your bottlenecks, but to control your bottlenecks and know where they are, right? So then what do you do next? Kaizen, improve, continuous improvement. So you would try making small experiments to improve your system. Maybe you tweak the number of people working in test. Maybe you look at different types of testing. Maybe you provide them with some new resources, a new tool for doing testing, I don't know. But you would at a periodic basis, just like in Scrum, you would have a retrospective. As a team, you would come up with an experiment, you would try something new, and then you would see how that experiment went. Use the scientific process and continue to improve your system. So rather than being a revolutionary thing, like Scrum is a revolution to your organization, Kanban is an evolutionary thing. It takes where you're at now and evolves it over time organically to be the best you can be. So that's it. That's a pretty deep dive into Kanban, and we'll do a couple other videos on Kanban, different aspects of it as well. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks. Bye-bye.